Good morning, heat pump friends and family, we should say. We are welcoming you today for a webinar on the development of the international heat pump markets, the European heat pump markets, and the sentiment and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on an otherwise very successful industry. I'm here together with Krystyna Dawson from BSRIA and with Lindsay Sugden from Delta EE, two well-known experts in the field, and we will share with you what we think is happening at the moment in one of the fastest growing renewable energy sectors. We will start with Krystyna, who will give us a broad overview. Many of you know the BSRIA International Outlook that otherwise we would probably have had at the Mostra Conveni already, so we'll do something of some of that here. And then I will continue with the European market, and we will finish with Lindsay Sugden, who is has an intimate knowledge about the sentiment of the heat pump industry when it comes to how are they affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Without any further ado, Krystyna, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I will wait for your colleague to let me present. There we go. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you, Thomas, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for attending and giving me opportunity to talk to you. I was thinking the times are actually very strange because in normal times I would never thought about inviting 100 people to my home, but there you go. Even in times of social distancing, we are somehow getting closer. So without further ado, I would like to introduce myself a little bit broader, because you probably know me, or most of you know me from BSRIA through our market intelligence division perspective. But BSRIA actually stands for Building Services Research and Information Association. And we are, before anything, a technical organization which is providing research and best practice guidance to building services operations. Today, nevertheless, the vast majority of my presentation is fed through my fantastic colleagues from Market Intelligence. I have, however, also some insights from BSRIA members, who mainly are contractors, building operators, so people who are on the field. You will see here the global overview of heat pump market development over the few of last years, and with a little forecast. I'm sorry, the slides are jumping a little bit going forward. So the heat pump market in 2019 reached about 3.3 million units globally. But when you are looking at the whole slide, you could say that heat pumps have been coming to us in sort of two waves. The first wave has started in 2012 and peaked in 2017. Then we have seen a fall, and the second wave has started to come right now. What was it related to? So basically the peak in 2017 and the very visible growth in 2016 are related to the biggest world market for heat pumps, which is actually China. At the beginning of this chart, China was still the biggest market, but the second biggest market was actually Japan. Europe was at the modest third place at the time. It has been changing over years, and by 2017, when China has Chinese market has reacted very vigorously to the government clear sky policy and the whole program of coal to electricity shift, then China has accounted for a big majority of the global heat pump market. Nevertheless, it has changed. Policy is volatile, as you say. Policy rollouts can also encounter some problems, as it has happened in China. And when their market dropped, the global market has dropped as well. Interesting to see what is happening from 2019, because the market starts growing, but this growth is now mainly related to Europe. While Europe is expected to grow from 2019 to 2023 with double-digit figures, China is supposed to progress, but much more slowly, with growth which is below 5%. The market is having a very positive outlook, and please don't be alarmed by the fact that when you look at a compound annual growth rate, it is decreasing. I mean, obviously, when the market is growing strongly, the percentage annual average growth is normally decreasing. This is very normal, but still the decrease is here very small, which certainly is very good news for the heat pump market. When we are looking at what this market is made of, I probably would like to emphasize that the data that I'm showing here are related to what we call hydronic heat pumps. Hydronic heat pumps, I mean those which distribute heating or cooling via water as a mean, not via air. So we are talking about heat pumps like air to water, ground to water, or domestic hot water heat pumps. You are seeing that the vast majority of the market in 2019, but also in other years, is accounted by air source heat pumps. They include split units and monoblock units. And across the world, you have differences. China is, for example, a split market. Japan is a monoblock market. Equally in Europe, we have France, which is split market, and UK, which is predominantly monoblock market. Germany is half-half, but that's actually Germany and UK are the only two countries where monoblocks are so popular. Air source heat pumps with heat recovery account for a very, very niche market. Ground source heat pumps, very important actually in terms of impact on CO2 emissions, are still also a very small market globally. Domestic hot water heat pumps are big and are growing. I also would like to stress that this type of heat pumps include cylinder integrated domestic hot water heat pumps. So these are not typical splits, typical air source heat pump splits. And this is something to bear in mind, because within this huge market of air source heat pumps, split air source heat pump, there are also some that are providing just hot water, not hot water and heating. The market also, when we look at it from installation type, the market is predominantly residential. Commercial heat pumps installed in commercial buildings account for just 9% of this market, but this is actually this market segment that I would like to bring your attention to. It is well known, of course, that commercial installations are having higher value. They also usually have higher margins. They are more customized, that's true. But an important attribute of a commercial segment is that it is very much more open to innovation than residential one. Normally, what we are seeing across all HVAC areas, innovation, new technologies are adopted at least 5 years before they become roughly popular in residential segment. It is important in view of the future, because I also wanted to draw here from the knowledge we have gathered from our members. BSRIA is a membership-based organization like EHPA. We only have members who are coming from building services operations. As I mentioned, contractors, building designers, building operators, facility managers. We have recently held quite a few discussions with them, trying to assess what is their view on the impact COVID-19 will have on what's happening in buildings and how HVAC systems and generally building operation will be impacted. There were lots of ideas, but two I think are pretty relevant for the heat pump market. People have mentioned cooling and flexibility. Cooling as a potential issue going forward, and flexibility related to huge societal changes that are brought by a very wide working from home pattern, but also through a big increase in worries related to health and safety issues. So why am I talking about cooling? Well, cooling is no more a comfort issue. It's becoming a necessity. International Energy Agency tells us that in the next 10 years, as many air conditioners will be installed around the world as were put in between 1902 and 2005. It's enormous. There is an issue with those because they use electricity and usually have much lower efficiency. When we are looking at global heat pump market, heat pumps installed to provide cooling account for just 6% of the global market. They are also units who are providing either heating or cooling. So normally, I'm sorry for this jumping of the slides. It's really, I try to control it, but it's something to do with the platform. So they are either providing heating in winter or cooling in summer. It is probably not enough for commercial buildings and not enough for the need of the end users and building owners going forward. I think that heat pumps might have a role going forward. Flexible heat pumps delivering both heating and cooling to help reduce growing cooling demand concerns. A challenge, but maybe an interesting thought. That's as much from me. Thank you very much. And I will be looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Krystyna. That's a very interesting and maybe an upbeat ending, because it shows us that the system perspective and the integration of heating and cooling could be one of the more important things to look at in the very near future. I am supposed to remind everybody that you can ask questions, and if you have questions, please put them into the questions and answer box that is available. Make yourself familiar with the tool. You have you have different small triangles that you can have a look at, and that give you this opportunity to ask questions. I will continue now with the European market, and I would say immediately that from the HPA perspective, we are looking at all heat pumps. We're not making that distinction to look only at the air-to-water units, but we look at all. And I am checking. Okay, so now you should see the slide. What you see today, what we have is the big number. We have a counter on our website of the EHPA that counts on the average addition of heat pumps every day, and as of today we have 13,600,000 units installed in Europe. We are very accurate, but of course you have to take it with a grain of salt. The market itself, I think I'm a little bit lost in this, so why is that not showing? I wanted to show. Here we go. We as Krystyna already said, the BSRIA is counting the numbers for air-to-water heat pumps, or for those heat pumps that have hydronic systems. And I want to shed light a little bit on this naming problem, because we have a technology that is, you could say, too good to be true. If we did not have heat pumps already, we would have to invent it. They provide heating and cooling at the same time. They can be used for refrigeration, they can be used for dehumidification, and they also help us to have a comfortable indoor environment, including heating and hot water, but they have different names. So I would really discuss a bit more with Krystyna how good the data quality is in all of this, because sometimes you ask people, are you using a heat pump, and they say no, but they do. And it's just not known to them that it's the same technology, but they use it under a different name. And so I wanted to show this and say the heat pumps, they are actually everywhere. If we were in a presentation room now, I would ask all of you who has a heat pump, and then probably you have something like 20-30% raising their hands, but that's not true. I guess everybody has at least one heat pump. That's your fridge, and another one in your dishwasher if you have a good one, and another one in your dryer, and if you have an electric car, you have a number 4. So the trend is actually going to heat pump number 5, which is then your heating device. And if you are working in an office building, or if you're benefiting from a more forward-looking district heating system, or if you buy milk from the Tine dairy in Norway, then you're actually benefiting from more heat pumps. So we have a technology that can be used across different areas of our society in the most effective way, and it is in fact the best energy efficiency tool that is available. But it also has additional advantages, and this is what we see now. When the renewable energy share of electricity is increasing, then we need balancing, and the heat pump based systems, including thermal and electric batteries, provide these services in different types of buildings. So the building becomes an active node. Also, when we use them efficiently in cities, when the air conditioning, the waste heat from air conditioning is used for hot water production, then you can reduce the waste of thermal energy into the cities and reduce heat islands. And since there is no emission at the point of production, you can also help to increase the air quality both outdoor and indoor. Allow me 2 words about the EHPA. We are an industry association that is not only looking at manufacturers, but has members from all parts of the value chain. We have heat pump manufacturers, component manufacturers, national associations, consultants, research and test institutes. And that's why I'm very happy to have both Lindsay and Krystyna also here, because they're not only here because they're experts, they're also here because they represent part of our membership. We have set ourselves last year a new goal, and that is to create the market framework that allows heat pumps to become the dominant heating solution in the European market, because we think it's the best thing that we should do. Heat pumps are not only helpful to these different energy and climate targets, they also provide jobs. And we have asked our members, where is your production site? Where are your production sites? And you can see here that we have 103 production sites identified across Europe. So the technology is solidly based in the different areas of Europe and has a very solid foundation of know-how, and in many areas is even a market leader worldwide. As I said, we have 1 million, well, actually we have increased our account now already, but in 2019, we sold 1,453,000 heat pumps. You can find the details on the statistics website of the EHPA. It's interesting to see where were the most heat pumps sold, and you see here the split between the 22 markets that we are covering, and it becomes visible that we have 3 markets that are responsible for 50% of all the sales, and then the top 10 markets are responsible for 90% of the sales. I can today count or can report about 20 markets. 2 of them are still missing, and 1 we had to correct, the Netherlands. They have delivered their data, but the final publication date is only at the end of this month, so I couldn't include them yet. So we expect actually a slightly better result. You see also here that the French market continues to be the most dominant market, being individually responsible for nearly 1/3 of all sales, and followed closely by Italy and Spain. And these are markets that are this big because we also count the air-to-air heat pumps in those cases where we can identify them as the heating devices. Then you see they are followed quickly by the big and established markets, Sweden and Norway, and probably the biggest runner-up has been Germany, that has really increased. If we look at the types, so what is dominating the sales in 2019, and this has been the case in 2018 and 2017 too, we see that reversible air-to-air heat pumps are by now taking the biggest share. They are closely followed by air-to-water heat pumps. And here we see also that the biggest energy carrier that is used is ambient energy. This is important to note because ambient energy is a renewable energy source according to the European directive for renewable energy. This is disputed in many areas of the world, but thermodynamics tells us that this energy is made useful via heat pumps, and you save considerable amounts of otherwise fossil energy. Since the energy has to come from somewhere, it is the air that provides it to us. You can see here also that the ground source heat pumps have a rather stable base at 100,000 units. And a rather new category is exhaust air heat pumps. And we have also started to count hybrid heat pumps. Hybrid heat pumps, the combination between a heat pump and another support boiler, typically oil or gas. And then you see a small number of industrial heat pumps here. We are working on improving the data situation as we speak, but we haven't finished the counting at the moment. If we look at the spread between the different heat pump types and the countries, you can see that there is a lot of tradition in selling heat pumps, and it depends on how heating systems have been built in the different countries. You see that the Baltic areas are very commonly using air-to-air heat pumps, apparently due to better building structure and an open design. So air-to-air for heating is common there. Finland, Estonia, Finland, Spain, Italy has the Mediterranean has the same, but also Norway, Sweden. And then we see the core countries of Europe, they have more a basis in hydronic heating. The standing out situation here for the sanitary hot water is in France. And if I recall that correctly, the reason for this is that in the past, you were able to accommodate your existing gas or oil boiler with a heat pump and benefit from positive legislation. And there we see also how legislation influences sales. If we look at the market altogether, then we see that the biggest markets also have the biggest turnover. This is an assumption based on standard sales prices and installation costs. And we see that the market, as we see it today, has around 9 billion euro split across Europe, as you can see. In a historic perspective, 2019 is the fifth year of growth, fifth year of double-digit growth. It started rather mediocre in 2012 and 2013 with 3%, and then it picked up speed with 12 and 11 and 14% in the end. So 2018, 2019 year-over-year growth was 14%. And as I said, we have not added all numbers, so there may be a slight increase in the near future. The benefits of this technology to the energy and climate targets, that's what we tell the policymakers. This is really the technology that helps you achieve the renewable energy target, the fossil energy reduction targets, commonly known as energy efficiency, and the CO2 emission reduction targets. We also see here that the heat pump technology itself provides 225 terawatt hours of useful energy. And this is roughly 10% of the energy that is used in residential heatings today. As I said, that there is flexibility provided. On the back of the envelope, we have calculated the flexibility potential to be around 3 terawatt hours per year. This is available. It's not used as we are still lacking flexible time of use tariffs to attract this type of flexibility with the end users. As I said, 2,625 terawatt hours of energy were used in 2015. The data is not better available on a more recent year, but you see that then it's 10% of the energy is provided by heat pumps today. If we look at the market share, so who has the better market penetration, then the dominating role of France is replaced by Norway. In Norway in 2019, 47 heat pumps were sold per 1,000 households, and this is actually quite an increase. When I thought about this, I think I need to make a presentation that shows how these numbers have changed. Norway has been the leader for quite a while, but also the installation number per 1,000 household has increased in Norway. And this graph shows in particular that we have huge potential in the rest of Europe. If you see the number of 2, 3, 4, and 5, I would call them the runner-up countries. But then there's also big markets like Spain and Italy that still don't have such a huge market penetration as the leading country, Norway. if Norway if we had the same market penetration as Norway everywhere, then we would have a factor 5 or 6 even multiplied of the current market, which shows us clearly that there is potential, but which also brings us to the question, are we ready? Is the value chain ready to accommodate for that growth? Are end users ready to accept this change in technology? And is the installer base sufficient to provide these units in an efficient manner? Then I wanted to answer one question that I typically get is that even possible? I mean, you know, can we install more heat pumps also in a cost-efficient manner? And I picked one study. You can pick one that you like, but I picked this one because I like it a lot. It's the study from the Lappeenranta University that was provided for the Energy Watch Group a while ago, and it shows that 100% renewable energy system by 2050 is achievable, and that this renewable-based energy system will be relying to a large margin on electricity. And when it comes to heating, there will be a lot of electricity used for heating. So the electrification of heat is not only an efficiency contribution, but it's also helping to use all this green electricity that we're expecting. This study is also looking at electricity in industrial applications, and also here heat pumps can provide a contribution. We see here in the study that 27% of all industrial heat can come from heat pumps in 2050, and we see also that the build-up starts in 2030, 2040, and 2050, and that's quite in line with what we expect ourselves. We see that the markets are growing now, but the market growth has to accelerate in the foreseeable future, probably after a ramp-up time over the next 5, 6, 7 years. Where do we stand in the whole heating system? This is still 2018 numbers, but we see that we have now in a market of 6.1 million boilers, around 20% heat pumps as a share, and when it comes to sanitary hot water heat pumps, the number is much smaller. Then we talk only about 2.5%. The rest is dominantly done by fossil energy, so that shows us the problem, but also the opportunity, because the heat pump manufacturers themselves, they can provide also the boiler manufacturers themselves, they are all offering heat pumps now, so we are ready to shift towards cleaner ways of providing heating and cooling. And I think I need to speed up a little bit, so just a few sentences on the political background. We have a sectoral target in the Renewable Energy Directive. This sectoral target is 1.3 percentage points to be achieved per year until 2030. This graph shows you the development over the past 14 years, and you see that we have barely ever achieved a value that was above 1, which shows that it's one thing to set a target, it's another thing to give these targets enough support to develop it over the next 10 years, and that's what we are asking from the Commission and from the national governments. They need to take heating and cooling serious, they need to take heat pumps serious, and probably now is the time to discuss a heat pump deployment strategy for the mass deployment, the mass ramp up of this technology. This is supported by the other targets that you have seen. We have a renewable energy target, an energy efficiency target, and a CO2 emission target. They are both the renewables and the energy efficiency target have been renewed, 32%, 32.5%. The CO2 emission reduction target has not been renewed, so there's still a discussion ongoing if this should not become 50 or 55%. That was part of Ursula von der Leyen's introduction statement when she took over the presidency. And she said also that there's going to be an EU Green Deal with 1 billion euros available to support it. Flagship initiative is Mr. Timmermans' housing renovation plan. So this renovation wave, as he has called it, is upcoming, and we are quite confident that heat pumps that do work in renovation can contribute to that. And then my special friend Elon Musk, not only do I like the Tesla cars or the revolution that he has done for the car industry, but he has also announced that now with the new heat pump in the Model Y, there should be a revolution in the HVAC sector. What you see here is this idea of an electric house with photovoltaic on the roof, then a heat pump in the building, a battery in the building, and an electric car in front on the other side. it looks quite appealing. I would say we don't see the heat pump again, so we have a bit of a marketing problem, because you see the battery, you see the photovoltaic panels, you don't see the heat pump. But if Elon Musk takes it up, I think we have to expect that there is going to be at least more marketing hype. I would say you can buy all these products ready today. It's just not getting the same marketing attention as if he's doing it. So to summarize that, the main areas of influencing, I think heat pumps work in renovation. EHPA has made a booklet for that. Heat pumps work in industry. This is the second big sector. And heat pumps will contribute to an increasingly renewable-based electric grid. All this has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are expecting now support schemes to trigger short-term demand, but we also lobby for a reform of the energy price system to create continuity, because whatever money is poured over the people today, it will have to be replaced in the end by a market framework that activates end users. And this is what we have called the glass ceiling. The energy prices are distorted, and in many countries of Europe, it's still more interesting to invest into a fossil boiler, and that needs to change. I will not go through these details in the sense of time. If we can manage all of this, then we expect that the growth that we see today will continue. And if the Clean Energy for All package that has been passed last year is fully implemented, this should give an additional driver. With that, I would like to close, and I would like to hand over to Lindsay to understand better what's your perspective, what does the industry think at the moment, is what I said here as an outlook, is that realistic, or do you think, no, we are impacted that big, that much that we cannot continue with that fast growth in the near future? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Thomas. So yeah, that was a good positive outlook, and basically I do agree. A short answer to your question. I think while we are seeing some impact with the COVID crisis, I think the outlook is still positive. And you're right that there's lots that we should request of policymakers. I think there's also things which the industry itself can do, and I'll talk about some of those. So I think everyone can see my screen. Yes. Just before I to the details, for anyone who doesn't know Delta, we're a research and consulting company helping our clients navigate the energy transition. So heat is a core focus of what we do, and within this, heat pumps and electrification of heat is a really important topic. We're working mainly for the heating industry and energy suppliers, helping them understand how to capture opportunities in this transition. So in response to questions we've been getting from many of our clients in recent months or weeks, we've been investigating the impact of the current COVID-19 crisis on heating market outlook and on our heating market forecasts. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So just to begin with, so Thomas has shown a good overview of where the overall European market is going at the moment, or where it is at the moment. I think 2019 was generally a positive year. These numbers here just relate to the 5 biggest heating markets in Europe, so France, Germany, UK, Netherlands, and Italy. As Thomas said, air-to-air heat pumps are also a really key part of this picture. These numbers are just for hydronic heat pumps, though, just to be clear. So our outlook for towards 2022 is, before the Corona crisis, was positive. This is the outcomes of our numbers based on how the COVID-19 crisis has impacted. So overall, the crisis has dampened the growth that we expected. However, post-2020, we do think that the market will recover fairly quickly. And in our kind of central scenario, we see by 2022 the sales are down by about 12% compared to the forecast that we would have had before the crisis, but they're still up from 2019. So we think it's a setback, but it's not going to ruin the industry. However, there are significant differences in the impact on different markets. So first of all, we look at how the post-crisis 2020 sales will compare to 2019. We actually see that in some markets, 2020 expectations are still for the market to grow compared to 2019. So in Germany and the Netherlands, they're still looking positive, while the market is expected to decline compared to 2019 this year, mainly as a result of the crisis. If we compare 2020 expectations post-crisis to the expectations which were set for 2020 before the crisis hit, we see that there is dampened growth in all of the markets. But again, the Netherlands and Germany, of these 5 big European markets, fare better than the other markets. There's a lot of reasons for this. I won't go through all of the countries in detail, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about the story in Germany, in the UK. Why is it different there? So in Germany, before the crisis, the market was already looking positive. Good subsidies in retrofit, with expectations of growth of around 30%. Heat pumps are already well established in new build and single family homes. So the market was expected to grow quite well this year. Since the crisis has hit, there has been a slowdown in construction, but not a stop as there has been in some other markets. This is resulting in new build sales dropping. In the retrofit sector, we're hearing there's delays to some retrofits plans, some cancellations, but the subsidies in place in retrofit are already sufficiently positive, though the market is expected to increase anyway in retrofit. So a dip in the German market, but overall it's in a strong position. So we don't expect that one to be so badly affected. If we compare that with the UK, just as an example of one which is perhaps going to be worst hit, before the crisis hit, the majority of growth was expected to come from the new build sector, particularly driven by building regulations, which are expected to come from 2021. But the UK heat pump market very much dominated by the new build segment. The retrofit market is fairly small, but a similar growth rate in retrofit was expected as in the last couple of years, as incentive funding was extended to 2021. With the crisis having hit, there's been a longer and perhaps more extreme shutdown than in Germany. Construction's been more badly affected, and because the new build market is such a big share of the heat pump market in the UK, this has had a knock-on effect. In retrofit, we're hearing about delayed and cancelled retrofits. Consumer spending reduces, and I think that one of the reasons that the retrofit market may be worst hit longer term is social housing is a big part of the retrofit market in the UK, and with expectations that reduced budgets there may mean that the retrofit of social housing will get delayed or cancelled as a result of budget constraints. So a varying picture across Europe. But there's lots of question marks about exactly what shape the recovery curve will look like. So we forecasted month by month out to 2022. On this graph, you can see our central scenario, where we see basically a dip in sales for kind of 6 to 8 weeks in the current quarter, and with a return to more or less normal, bit dampened growth, and new build being the worst affected segment, mainly due to the construction. However, there are different scenarios and a lot of uncertainty. In a low scenario, there could be, for example, a second wave of infection, second lockdown. This is represented by this kind of W-shaped curve here. The economic consequences of this can make it difficult for customer spending power to return, which would have a particularly bad impact in the renovation sector. You could see longer term factory closures, supply issues, potentially subsidies being cut. So in that situation, we would expect no growth really in the next 3 years at least. So obviously not a situation that we would like to be in. But there is also a high scenario. So you can't quite see the dots there, but essentially in a high scenario, you have growth recovering very quickly by the third quarter of this year, and essentially returning to what our expected forecast would have been before the crisis. So in this kind of scenario, you could, for example, have governments cutting fossil fuel subsidies as a result of the low oil prices. You may have recovery packages which help avoid long-term recession, and a strong focus on a green recovery, driving incentives and green finance. And I think also real engagement from the heat pump industry in ways to come out of this crisis. So that's the next thing that I want to talk about, or the final thing I want to talk about. The heat pump industry can help to drive the recovery to a higher scenario. For sure, policy support and so on is critical. But we also think that the crisis could catalyse a kind of paradigm change in the industry. And I'm going to mention a couple of trends which we've already seen happening over the past couple of years, but which we think could potentially be accelerated by this crisis and create new opportunities or growing opportunities for heat pumps. So the first trend I wanted to talk about was the shift to service-based business models. So as I mentioned here, change in focus from shifting boxes, so heat pumps and boxes, to selling services around the heat pumps. Heat as a service is increasingly a buzzword going around the industry. The heat as a service landscape is already packed with players. This is just an overview of some of the key players and what's going on. We think that these kind of service offerings, where customers don't pay the upfront cost of the system, but they pay ongoing for a service package, they pay for the heat that they receive rather than paying for the kilowatt hours of electricity, for example. This is creating a better customer proposition. At the moment, post the current crisis, the need is greater than ever for addressing some of these customer challenges of upfront cost and lack of trust in new technology. We know that heat pumps aren't new technology, but to a lot of end users, they really are. So we think this is an opportunity for the heat pump industry to engage, partner, and help to drive this transition towards more service-based models and not just shifting boxes. The other trend that I wanted to mention was digitalization. This is a theme that I know that EHPA is also engaging a lot with at the moment. The current crisis has seen increased engagement in digitalization. We're seeing growth in demand for energy insight services, remote diagnostics, digitalization across the supply chain to improve flexibility and kind of resilience going forward in the supply chain. This is something which can be beneficial to the customer and to the installer. So just to give an example, remote diagnostics is just one example of how digitalization is already bringing opportunities. These numbers relate to the boiler market. We know that a lot of heat pump players are engaging in this kind of remote diagnostics servicing as well. But we see this certainly being something that will grow, and with the current crisis and it being harder and harder for installers to come into homes and so on, then we really think this could be a catalyst for something for services based on remote diagnostics. to grow. So I could go on about many other things, but essentially to conclude, we think that the heat pump market can recover from this crisis. Of course, policy support will help, but we also see there's clear actions that the heat pump industry can take to support this recovery. Exploring heat as service-based offerings, as I mentioned, investing in digitalization, just a couple of examples. We can see that some companies are already doing this. We think that these trends will only be strengthened by the current COVID-19 crisis. So now is really the time for the heat pump industry to grab the opportunity. And that's how I'm going to leave off, hopefully on a positive note.
Well, thank you very much, Lindsay. We have a few questions from the audience. We start with a few questions for Krystyna. They are more technical. So do you have data on capacity ranges, especially more than 20 kilowatts and a split between air and water source? I assume yes.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We follow the market and segment the market quite in depth for heat pumps across the countries globally. I can't give you the numbers out of my head now because they are very different for different regions and particularly different countries. But some of the differentiation between air-to-water and ground-to-water source heat pumps you have certainly seen on my slides. In terms of capacity ranges, yes, but you would have to contact us separately because it's difficult for me to just produce the numbers out of my head. I'm sorry.
Sure. And there is another question on this issue of units that provide heating and cooling at the same time. Do we know better how much we sell for them and which service do they provide?
Yes, I mean the heat pumps that I have been showing, you know, the reversible heating and cooling. These were not 3 or 4 pipe systems. Generally, the 4 pipe systems we are seeing in air conditioning systems, VRFs, for example, provide simultaneous heating and cooling. The problem with those is that they are pretty expensive and complex systems. I don't believe there are very many heat pumps, hydronic heat pumps, so that take water as a mean of distribution of cooling that are 4-piped at the moment. It is certainly an opportunity in our view. So yes, we will be looking at this market, although I guess it is very much within R&D phase at the moment, rather than market deployment. However, you know, cooling. Coming back to your point, Thomas, about heat pumps within air conditioning area. Of course, we have heat pumps, and they are reversible heat pumps, so they provide heating and cooling, split units, for example. But there is a very different emphasis on this type of units, which are made to deliver cooling, really, and there are some issues raised on the back of COVID related to the further use of these units. And of course, there are issues raised with the energy, the amount of energy that they use going forward. So again, I think it is an opportunity for hydronic units here to look at.
Yeah. We have had this question. Is an air conditioning unit or an air-to-air heat pump, for that matter, is that a dangerous tool when it comes to spread of viruses? Do you have any opinion on that one? I have one, but I would.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually the point of discussions with our members. I mean, our building operators, the guys who are operating, you know, building systems. They come from very huge clusters of commercial buildings in very different areas. There is absolutely no scientific evidence to support that at this very moment. So this is something that needs to be said very clearly. There is a psychological factor that plays a role at this very moment. Is it temporary or is it something that will last longer is a question. I think that when people were talking about delivery of cooling to buildings, alternatives like chilled ceilings have been mentioned, but also hydronic heat pumps. Although people recognize that this is the technology which is not very widely spread within commercial buildings. It's an interesting question. Why is that? As I say, commercial segment is an interesting one from a variety of reasons, but we all know heat load will go down, cooling load will go up going forward, and this is. I wouldn't like to make any statements, but I just, thinking about it and listening to what our guys are saying, I thought that's an opportunity that hydronic heat pump industry could think of in the longer term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. I mean, on this matter of is an air conditioning system or is an air-based heating system a vector for spreading the virus? We had a lot of debate internally too, and we can say after also debate with the Mediterranean countries and the experts there that a properly designed system is not, there is no evidence that a properly designed air conditioning system is increasing a spread of virus. To the contrary, if you increase the ventilation speed and the air refreshment speed in a building, it's probably beneficial to the users. And there is a lot of discussion now between social distancing and then bringing people back into schools and into offices. And I think what we can say is for the moment that if the ventilation rate is increased, it's by tendency better instead of worse for the participants and for the users of these buildings.
Air conditioning doesn't necessarily mean ventilation though, Thomas. Air conditioning very often is moving the same air within the room. So ventilation, yes, absolutely. But
and that's why I say a properly designed system. We do not want to just turn the energy, the air around. That's clear. That's clear.
Yeah.
There's a number of more technical questions. I would like to ask the people that ask these questions should just send them to us because it applies to what do you cover in specific in detail and when do you have data available and so on. I would like to use the time that we have to discuss a little bit more this COVID-19 impact. And I would also encourage the audience to provide input on what they think the industry would need to overcome the dent in the sales vision that we had, at least. Maybe, and Lindsay and Krystyna, also for you, for the international perspective, what could we expect or what should we ask to governments when it comes to these huge amounts of recovery money that is now prepared? What do you think will really help this industry to fill at least a little bit of these gaps that we see the negative impact and to make it a positive one? Where do you see the fastest creation of demand?
I will maybe answer it a little bit more indirectly, but again, drawing from the conversations we have and discussions we have had with our members, one of the questions that we have debated was, will the whole focus of the wide end user public on health issues and air quality, well-being drive the further interest or drive interest higher up towards, again, climate change issues? And there was quite a broad consensus that it is very likely to be the case. I mean, we have also seen, the impact that the lockdown globally has had on the pollution levels across the whole entire world, on the CO2 levels across the world. And this is something that came actually as a revelation to very many, that it is real, that this data that we have, some were claiming are scaremongering about the impact of climate change. It actually is happening one way or the other, depending on human activity. So there is certainly from the end user base a big growing focus on renewable energy, on actions to mitigate climate change impact. And this is certainly something which is very positive. Purchasing power, yes, it is a problem, because the global debt that we have created across the whole world will be a bit of a problem. But having said that, and forgive me for giving a little bit of a personal opinion here, I would imagine that after COVID, very many governments will also come under huge pressure of analyzing the response. Was it good enough? What was wrong? And this will come on the wake of very many other problems. They will look for topics to promote that are positive, and going for net zero path is certainly one. I think there will be a focus from very many governments related towards net zero, towards fighting climate change, and this is again good news, where I would be relatively optimistic that in the not very short term, next year will be tricky, but after 2021, I would imagine that the money will be there on offer for this particular area.
That's a question also to Lindsay. How much of these announced recovery plans were you able to take into consideration when you asked your clients for their insight?
No, a lot of them have not been really clear yet. We're following it really closely, and there's certainly been announcements of trying to make a green recovery a priority. I mean, the areas that we think are key and which are kind of being discussed to varying degrees in different countries. I think where it's most important, it's driving growth in the retrofit market and getting the customer on board and making sure that this crisis doesn't push back the customer shifting from fossil fuels to lower carbon systems. So ensuring that incentive payments don't get delayed, more or less this seems to be okay. We haven't heard of significant delays happening. Making green financing available, this is something which should grow. So green financing for low carbon heating projects, renovation projects. And we know that this is already quite varied from market to market. Some markets it's challenging already to access. So this is one area which is key. Having the regulatory frameworks so that new business models can flourish. So things like, for example, when we're looking at these kind of heat as a service models, there's sometimes restrictions on third parties being able to access incentives to help these business models to work. To be that, policymakers need to make sure that this isn't the case, that these kind of models can be enabled, because they're really key. Do you see
this trend? Do you see it? I mean, it's interesting to consider from a theoretical perspective, but do you see these models to be rolled out across Europe?
Yeah, I think we definitely think that they will be, and that there are signs that they are being in some markets, in some segments of some markets. So we don't think it's just a buzzword for now, which will disappear. You look at Denmark, for example. I'm based in Denmark. The district heating industry is really behind this model, and it's being rolled out in a lot of different local regions here, with basically a kind of district heating contract, but with heat pumps being installed in individual homes. And this is, well, at the moment it's still like hundreds of installations a year. I know this isn't significant yet, but there's a lot of weight behind it. And then you've got really big players in other markets who are really starting to push for it. NG in France, for example, and you've got Shell in the UK, EDF Energy in the UK, who both recently launched offerings. You've got some big energy companies starting to push it.
But you don't see that this will overcome shortcomings in end user demand, right? And maybe I can hand that over to, after you answer, to Krystyna. How is that situation worldwide? Would you expect a similar decline as Lindsay foresaw for Europe, also for the world? Maybe in this order.
So I didn't catch the first part.
Lindsay, do you think that these heat as a service offerings that could in principle help to overcome reduced demand, do you think that they can overcome this?
Obviously, there is a lot of different drivers involved in overcoming this crisis and overcoming the retrofit, the heat pumps into retrofit barrier, which were there before the crisis. So this in itself isn't the silver bullet, but I think it's a really interesting case. And when we look at what the retrofit market in most markets in Europe has really struggled to take off for years and years. The growth is not significant. In new build, you can say heat pumps have made the argument. They're basically, to varying degrees in different markets, but basically, the new build sector is going towards heat pumps, and that's been successful. But retrofit is still a challenge. We think that the way that low carbon heating systems are sold is the biggest challenge. The upfront cost is a barrier. Customers are still uncertain about making this switch, and so we do think that this kind of business model can really be a trigger, and we're seeing it triggering good growth in some sectors. Social sector in the Netherlands, for example, as I mentioned, in some regions of Denmark where the district heating industry is pushing it, we're seeing that it can work, and so. Yeah, we do really believe in it as one element of how to overcome these challenges.
Okay. And internationally, Krystyna, both, how do you see the decline, and do you have what's your perspective on how could we overcome this decline?
I mean, heat as a service, it's a very interesting one, and I agree entirely with Lindsay that in Europe it is something that can drive additional demand. When you look at the world from this perspective, the question is how many heat pumps worldwide provide heat? Because I didn't go into very deep details in terms of, what do heat pumps are used for. But I mean, we are not talking, as I mentioned, about air conditioning, because that's mainly cooling. But within hydronic heat pumps that I was referring to, there is also quite a substantial chunk of units that are just providing domestic hot water at the moment. It's certainly in China. It's Australia is just domestic hot water heat pump market. You can argue what heat pumps are doing in Japan as well. I mean, are they providing domestic hot water? I would say yes, that's the vast majority. So there is it is different. US, for example, is a country which is digitalized enough in big cities to have an uptake on heat as a service, and in the north of the US, yes, heat is very much needed. But they have a very specific market to deliver their heat, and heat pumps are there very small still. In terms of drivers, I think that globally, in very many countries that are really significant heat pump markets now, it is very policy driven, and policy will keep supporting this market, but we will not see such drastic growth as we have seen before. Japanese market, for example, is a bit like Swedish market. It's very stable. It's a huge installed base. It's supported by replacements, and there will be no fireworks there. Australian market is domestic hot water, is still enjoying support from the government schemes. So the increase will be steady because the money is there to support consumer decisions on purchases. Then we have China, of course, and in China the policy, I wouldn't venture to predict policy from the Chinese government. But we are expecting, based on what our Chinese team is telling us, that the market will grow. What is suffering from the COVID, from the pandemic, is the share of heat pumps in sales of the overall market. So this type of heat pumps are probably likely to decline going forward, but they do not account for a prevalent part of the market. So overall, I think heat pumps will be growing. And if you are talking about wider heat pump markets, I mean, BSRIA is also following very closely all the air conditioning markets. So we are looking at reversible splits and air conditioning heat pumps. Yes, they will be growing. They will be growing. There is.
Can we touch briefly? We have 5 minutes left. Can we touch briefly on this development? Fossil fuel prices are going down. You can get a liter of gas below €1 at the moment. Oil is cheap. Do you see a manifestation of choice for fossil energy as we speak, and in combination with consumer expectation and consumer optimism, maybe there is a bit of a drawback from that perspective too, that people say, I don't have enough money to pay for whatever I want to pay for, so now I will certainly not invest in my heating system, I will not pay for making it more renewable, and I will just keep the very affordable system at the moment as it is, and maybe even select one because it is so cheap. What do you think about that?
It's definitely a danger.
Both. I mean, it's really that's something that I'm confronted with. People say to me, but now we have this problem that fossil energy is so cheap, so the disadvantage that heat pumps have in many countries is even accelerated, and we get a boiler replacement that is a like-for-like replacement. So we are manifesting, you could say, we are creating stranded assets for the next 20 years because people do not invest in renewable energy under the current situation.
I think that this is definitely a real danger, and something that we, at least in the conversations we've had on the retrofit market, this is a big concern, that planned renovation where they may have been planning to put a heat pump in is that they're delaying it, perhaps cancelling it and deciding to just stick with the original system, because as you say, the prices are so low. You can hope for policy intervention to adjust these price differences, but that we can't rely on that. I think it is a real danger, and it's the main reason why we'll see a dampening of growth. It's another reason why we believe in some of these alternative business models, which can try to rectify it, but obviously the business models still need the economics to work out. So I don't have a silver bullet for how this can be solved, but we have to keep tracking the. Yeah.
It has always been. I mean, we have been monitoring heat pump markets for long enough, from the very beginning, 2004 actually. So oil price fluctuations have always had an impact on heat pump sales. We have always, and because we are doing both heat pumps and boilers, we have always seen that whenever oil price was going down, oil boilers sales were going up. And of course, during the last 5 years, these are mainly condensing oil boilers. But I know that there are countries in which oil condensing boilers sales still go up. So it is too short at this very moment to tell you if the impact of the low oil price is visible yet, because I mean the research hasn't been completely done yet. But I think that there is a pretty big danger, because it has always been a case.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Okay. I have to say time is up. One last statement from you. What's your overall perception? Will we come largely unharmed out of this crisis, or will it be a bigger problem than we anticipated?
It will be tough for a while, but we will overcome. There is no doubt about the fact that heat pump technology. Well, there were very often questions. When do we reach the tipping point where heat pumps become unstoppable? It's a big say, but I think if we haven't reached it yet, it's very close.
That's a good one, Lindsay.
Yeah, I do think that it can be overcome, but again, it will be tough for a while. I think this crisis says it could really trigger a paradigm shift in the way that people think about energy and interact with it. So I think that can be an opportunity. The heat pump industry is up for it.
Indeed. So I think we can close this with an upbeat notion. We see that the markets are developing. We see the markets are robust. There is a crisis, but we also see that in many countries, the heating industry that is installing heat pumps has not been affected as badly as other sectors. And so we hope that the tipping point for mass deployment of heat pumps is close. So we will, as EHPA, offer you a number of additional webinars over the course of the next months, in fact, because we realize that probably we will not be able to do anything in person, but the messages still prevail, and we need to continue our work in order to convince policymakers and the general public that we have solutions to create a 100% renewable, clean and efficient society by 2050. Unfortunately, the development is rather slow, so we have to start early in order to make this change, this energy transition, a success. I hope you bear with us and would like to see you again in any of the future events that we are all providing and creating. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.